A newly appointed chief of police, moving unseen among his own, sought to witness the true faces of his officers. But when a callous officer unleashes a vile insult, believing him to be insignificant, the precinct is poised on the brink of a stunning truth that will shatter their reality. The oppressive humidity of a deep August morning hung heavy in the air as Marcus Thorne, the city's newly minted chief of police, emerged from his unmarked vehicle in the center of Oakhaven, a quiet town nestled within the sprawling amber hills. Clad in a faded flannel shirt, well-worn denim, and scuffed work boots, he was the very picture of anonymity, bearing no resemblance to a man who had dedicated 20 years of his life ascending the ladder of law enforcement. And that precisely was the point. Marcus held a core belief. To understand the truth, one must see it raw and unfiltered, not through the sanitized veil of official appointments and staged greetings. As an African-American man assuming command in a precinct shadowed by persistent rumors of impropriety, his mission was to see his department as it truly was. And what method could be more effective than becoming just another face in the crowd? The precinct's parking area thrummed with the energy of officers flowing in and out, and as Marcus surveyed the scene, he absorbed the easy camaraderie and the fleeting, uninterested looks that drifted in his direction. Not a single soul showed a flicker of recognition, which was perfectly expected. His promotion had been made public only a few days prior, and he had deliberately kept his initial visit under wraps until the formal walkthrough scheduled for later that day. He tugged down the bill of his simple baseball cap, drawing in a long, steadying breath as the immense burden of his purpose to excise the deep-seated poison corrupting this department settled upon him. Opposition was familiar territory for him, yet he sensed with unwavering certainty that this new challenge would push his limits in ways he could not yet foresee. Drawing closer to the building, the distant echo of laughter drifted on the thick air, and Marcus slipped through a secondary entrance, his presence completely unnoticed amidst the symphony of idle conversation and incessantly ringing telephones. The linoleum floors shone with a sterile gleam beneath the unforgiving glare of fluorescent tubes, while the unmistakable aroma of burnt, day-old coffee saturated the atmosphere. He moved with a deliberate, unhurried pace, a silent observer absorbing the intricate dance of interactions around him. Clusters of officers gathered by their workstations, some sharing anecdotes, while others were engrossed in their reports. He remained a ghost in the machine, utterly ignored by everyone, until the moment he stopped his quiet journey near the entrance to the break room. "Hey, you!" A voice, sharp and abrasive, sliced through the ambient murmur. Marcus turned, his eyes meeting a Caucasian officer who was advancing on him. An arrogant smirk etched onto his features, his nameplate identifying him as Officer Flint. Trailing him, a small audience of fellow officers lounged against a nearby wall, their gazes fixed on the unfolding scene with a palpable sense of anticipation. Marcus began to form a response, but Flint cut him off before a single word could escape. "A little lost, are we?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, this isn't a homeless shelter." The officer's every word was laced with a thick, insulting disdain. "You need to take your problems and get out of here." Marcus stood frozen, the officer's venomous words striking him like a physical blow. A silent debate raging within him. Correct the man now and end this, or allow the ugly spectacle to play out to its conclusion. Before a decision could be made, Flint closed the distance between them, amplifying his voice for the benefit of his smirking colleagues. "Are you deaf? I said get out. We don't want your kind loitering around here." A wave of cruel laughter erupted from the watching officers as Marcus felt his jaw tighten, his pulse hammering in his ears. He tried once more to speak, but Flint leaned in, his face now just inches from his own. And then, with no warning at all, the officer spat directly in Marcus Thorne's face. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to suspend. Marcus's breath caught in his throat as the disgusting, warm spittle traced a path down his cheek, the sound of the surrounding laughter swelling into a deafening roar. One of the onlookers slammed his hand on a desk, bending over with howling amusement, while another was heard to mumble something about putting the local trash in its place. Marcus's mind was a whirlwind of controlled fury, the blood pounding a furious rhythm against his eardrums. Yet his composure remained an unbreakable shield as he calmly reached into his pocket, retrieved a clean handkerchief, and wiped the filth from his skin with slow, measured movements. "Is this the standard of treatment for every citizen who enters this building?" he inquired, his voice a quiet, solid force of pure steel. Flint just smirked. "Only the ones who have no business being here." The chorus of laughter exploded once more. But this time Marcus offered no response, simply turning his back on the scene and proceeding down the main corridor, leaving the jeering officers in his wake. Just as he was approaching the administrative wing of the precinct, the building's intercom system crackled to life, its tinny voice summoning all personnel to the central briefing room. It was time. The briefing room hummed with the lively chatter of officers streaming in, many clutching mugs of coffee, others sharing the punchlines to private jokes. Marcus entered through a less-used side door, now carrying a manila folder emblazoned with the precinct's official crest. And he paused just beyond the threshold, watching the room populate with now familiar faces, a few of them still wearing the lingering smirks from the encounter moments ago. At the head of the room, Captain Eva Rostova, a formidable woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, called for their attention. "All right, listen up, people. We have a very important introduction to make this morning." The room's ambient noise subsided as a wave of curiosity swept through the assembled officers. Flint, still propped against the far wall with his arms folded across his chest, wore the same self-satisfied expression, the man clearly reveling in the morning's events. Captain Rostova cleared her throat. "As you are all aware, Chief Morrison retired last month. We have been anticipating the arrival of his successor, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you to your new leader, an individual with a truly remarkable career and a bold new vision for this department." And then Marcus Thorne stepped into the light. His footsteps echoed with deliberate weight as he moved toward the podium, and a sudden sharp silence fell over the room. His very presence seemed to seize the air, commanding the focus of every person present as he placed the folder on the lectern and let his gaze drift slowly, deliberately across the sea of faces, his profound calm only serving to amplify the crackling tension. The smirk on Officer Flint's face evaporated, the blood draining from his features as the horrifying reality of the situation crashed down upon him. Around the room, a current of unease sparked between the officers. Whispers erupted and eyes widened in disbelief, all fixed upon the man at the podium. "Good morning," Marcus began, his voice unwavering and clear. "My name is Marcus Thorne, and as of this moment, I am your new chief of police." The silence that followed was absolute, a crushing weight that filled every corner of the room. Flint's face flushed a deep, burning crimson, his earlier bravado instantly dissolving into pure dread. Marcus's eyes found him, lingered on him for a single, powerful beat longer than was comfortable, and then continued their sweep of the room. "When I first came in this morning," Marcus continued, "I did so in civilian attire. I did this because I needed to see this department with my own eyes, through a lens that was not polished or prepared for me. And what I witnessed was incredibly revealing." A low murmur began to ripple through the assembled officers, but Marcus raised a single hand, and the room fell silent once more. "In the very short time I have been on these premises, I have already observed conduct that is not merely unprofessional, but is in fact utterly and completely unacceptable. Let me be perfectly, unequivocally clear," he stated, his voice ringing with authority. "The culture of disrespect that has been permitted to grow and fester within these walls, it ends now, today." The room was deathly still, the profound gravity of his declaration settling upon every officer. Flint shuffled his feet, his gaze now fixed to the floor in a desperate attempt to become invisible. Marcus moved from behind the podium, his tone becoming sharper, yet remaining impeccably controlled. "Respect is not a choice in this line of work. It is not an optional extra. It is the very bedrock upon which our profession is built. And when we abandon it, we don't just fail ourselves. We fail the very people we have sworn an oath to serve." He allowed the silence to stretch, to press down on them, watching as officer after officer shifted uncomfortably, under his intense scrutiny. This morning I saw some of you laughing. You were laughing because you believed you were watching a powerless man being taught a lesson. But I am here to remind you that every single person who walks through that door is entitled to respect. It does not matter if they wear a badge, and it does not matter who you think they are. His words were a razor's edge, slicing through the tense atmosphere, and not a soul dared to move a muscle. Marcus let the quiet hang in the air, his gaze unblinking, the pressure in the room becoming almost unbearable as each officer felt the personal weight of his indictment. Flint shifted his weight once more, his profound discomfort now visible to all as tiny beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. But Chief Thorne was not finished. "I am fully aware that change can be a difficult process," he said, his voice a steady current of pure authority. "But hear me now. There will be absolutely zero tolerance for any action, any word that disrespects the fundamental dignity of another human being. I do not care if that person is your partner, a member of the public, or anyone else you encounter." He moved away from the podium entirely, walking slowly, deliberately toward the gathered officers. His presence radiating a quiet power, his voice a vessel of controlled intensity. "Officer Flint," Marcus said, his voice resonating in the still room as he came to a stop just a few paces from the disgraced man. Flint physically flinched at the sound of his name. Any last remnant of his morning's bravado completely evaporated. "You," Marcus continued, his eyes locking with Flint's, "are a perfect representation of every single thing that is broken within this department. When you chose to spit in my face, you didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected the shield on your uniform. You disrespected the oath you took. And you disrespected the entire community we are all sworn to protect." Flint began to stammer. "Chief, I had no idea." "That is precisely the problem," Marcus cut in, his voice like cracking ice. "You didn't care to know? You didn't pause for a single second to think, to consider, to be a professional. You acted because you made an assumption that the man standing before you was worthless, that he didn't matter. And that very assumption is the poison that has caused this department to forfeit the trust of the people it is meant to serve." The room was a tomb, every officer standing like a statue. Marcus then turned his piercing gaze from Flint to the rest of the room. "What I saw this morning was not just the mistake of one officer. It was the product of a culture where intimidation and bigotry are not simply tolerated, but are treated as a source of amusement. And that culture is over." He took a step back toward the front of the room, his voice gaining in volume and intensity. "I have dedicated my entire career to fighting for justice, not only on the streets, but inside the very walls of police departments just like this one. Change is never easy, and it will not be accomplished in a day. But I will make you this promise, for as long as I am your chief, this precinct will be defined by 3 principles: integrity, respect, and absolute accountability." Marcus paused, letting the power of his words permeate the room, then gave a subtle nod to Captain Rostova before delivering his final point. "Effective immediately, Officer Flint is suspended from duty, pending a full internal affairs investigation. And for any of you who might be tempted to think this is merely a token gesture, think again. This is only the first of many changes to come." A collective gasp swept through the room. Flint's face burned with a renewed, furious crimson, his jaw clenching tightly as he desperately avoided the accusing stares of his colleagues. Marcus, entirely unfazed by the reaction, stood resolute. "This is not about punishment," he declared firmly. "This is about establishing a standard, and if you are unwilling or unable to meet that standard, then this is no longer the place for you." He swept his gaze across the room a final time, making eye contact with officer after officer. "If you are ready to do better, to be better, then we will all move forward on this new path together. But understand this, I will hold every single one of you accountable, every single day." The meeting concluded in a profound, heavy silence, the officers filing out of the room robbed of their usual boisterous energy. Marcus lingered at the podium for a moment, his eyes following Flint as the suspended officer stormed from the room, his face a turbulent storm of humiliation and rage. The remaining officers studiously avoided making eye contact, their faces a mixture of emotions ranging from shame-faced guilt to deep, sober reflection. Back within the quiet sanctuary of his new office, Marcus sank into his chair, releasing a long, slow breath. He knew with absolute clarity that this was only the very first step. Decades of ingrained behavior and toxic attitudes would not vanish in a day, and he was realistic enough to know that for some, they might never change. But he hadn't come to Oakhaven to be popular. He had come to be effective. The telephone on his desk buzzed to life. It was Captain Rostova. "Chief," she began, her voice cautious, "I just wanted to say, you handled that situation with more fortitude than most would have." "Thank you, Captain," Marcus replied, his tone all business. "But the real work begins now. I want a complete review of Officer Flint's entire service record on my desk by morning. Every complaint, every incident report, everything you have." "You'll have it," Rostova confirmed, before pausing for a moment. "And, Chief, I believe you truly shook some of them to their core today, in a good way." Marcus ended the call, permitting himself a single fleeting moment of satisfaction before turning his attention to the formidable mountain of paperwork that awaited him. In the weeks that followed, a palpable shift occurred within the precinct. Officers who had once eagerly partaken in Flint's cruel humor now gave him a wide berth, while hushed conversations about his suspension became the new currency of department gossip. Marcus made it his daily ritual to walk the corridors, offering a professional greeting to every person he encountered, his consistent presence serving as a quiet, constant reminder of the new standard of leadership. Some officers embraced the change wholeheartedly. A younger recruit, Officer Miller, approached Marcus one afternoon to confess that she had passively gone along with the toxic environment out of a genuine fear of reprisal from senior officers. "I want to be better, Chief," she admitted with sincere conviction. "That is all I ask of anyone," Marcus responded, his voice gentle yet firm. "It always starts with you." But not all were so willing to evolve. Flint, predictably, filed a formal appeal of his suspension, citing unfair and discriminatory treatment. Marcus did not yield, standing resolute in his conviction that accountability was a non-negotiable requirement. The subsequent deep dive into Flint's record unearthed a disturbing pattern of prior complaints, from allegations of excessive force to numerous instances of unprofessional conduct. His appeal was summarily denied, and Marcus used the opportunity to make it abundantly clear that the era of sweeping misconduct under the institutional rug was officially over. In spite of this tangible progress, Marcus knew the journey ahead was a marathon, not a sprint. Introducing mandatory training on topics like implicit bias and community policing was met with a spectrum of reactions, from eager acceptance to sullen resistance, but he remained steadfast in his mission. Every small victory, a junior officer finding the courage to speak out, a veteran officer pausing to reconsider an old habit, was another crucial step in the direction of profound and lasting change. One Saturday morning, while attending a local community fair, a young boy approached him with timid steps. "Are you really the police chief?" the child asked, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "I am," Marcus confirmed with a warm smile. "My dad says you guys don't care about people like us," the boy confessed, his voice so quiet it was almost lost in the noise of the fair. Marcus knelt, bringing himself down to the boy's eye level. "I can't undo what happened in the past," he said softly, "but I can promise you that we are trying very hard to be better. And if you ever need help, you make sure you come and find me, okay?" The boy offered a solemn nod, a tentative smile finally blooming on his face. It was precisely these moments that served as a powerful reminder for Marcus of why he had accepted this incredibly difficult job. By the time his first year had concluded, the Oakhaven precinct was still a work in progress, but it was also a place transformed. Those officers who had been unable or unwilling to adapt to the new standards had departed, making way for new recruits who shared the chief's vision of a just and respectful police force. The community, which had been justifiably wary, was beginning to notice tangible signs of a different approach, a genuine and sustained effort to rebuild broken trust and to bridge the divides that had separated them for so long. Marcus stood in the main hallway of the precinct one evening, observing his officers as they concluded their shifts, and he noticed the quality of their laughter and conversation had changed. It was no longer at the expense of others, but was instead authentic, inclusive, and built on mutual respect. He was under no illusions that the challenges were all behind him, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a powerful sense of hope. Change was never a simple path, but he knew deep in his soul that it was worth every single battle.